women that he has taken an oath to serve ahead of his own personal self-interest. And it needs to stop. And you contrast that with Vice President Biden, a man who has dedicated his life to this country, to public service, to leading with character and integrity, a man that knows and understands what it's like to be a military family, to know what it's like to send a son off to war. We don't have to guess what Vice President Biden and Senator Harris will do for our country when we get them elected. We already know, because they've been doing it, and we can have confidence that they will turn this country around. That's why I'm here, and that's why I'm proud to support Vice President Biden and Senator Harris, and that's why we have to get the job done.
Thank you so much, Congressman. I really appreciate you being here today. We're hopeful to get another question in with you, but I know you need to head out for a vote. Thanks for all you're doing, and thank you for your service to our country, and really being that next generation of leaders that know what it's like to serve, and know what it's like to have the importance of leaders of integrity and character, and to speak out. So thank you again.
Thank you, Adam. And if I could just say one more thing before I head out that I think it's really important to say for the group here. You know, I'm a member of Congress now, but my military career started as an enlisted soldier. I enlisted and was Private Crow decades ago. Then I became an officer. And I view so much of my work now through the lens of my time as Private Crow, what it was like to be on the receiving end of decisions made in this town, receiving end thousands of miles away of decisions made here and the very real consequences. Then I became a platoon leader, and I led a platoon of men and women. They represented all different backgrounds of our nation. They were Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, straight, gay, people that were wealthy, people that were poor and grew up on farms and ranches in Texas, truck drivers from Ohio, surfers from California. It was the melting pot. When I think of this nation, I think of that platoon. And two amazing things happened when that platoon went to war in Iraq. The first was we were stronger because of that diversity. We had each come from different backgrounds, had lived different lives, had overcome different struggles to be there, and we gained strength from that. And we were a better team because of that background. Then the second thing that happened was we focused on what we had in common. We focused on our shared values as Americans and the common mission. And we drew strength from that diversity, focused on what we had in common, and we did great things, and we all came back. That's the America that I know and love. And that is what makes America great, because of who we are. And that's what's at risk, because President Trump doesn't believe in that vision. He wants to pit us against each other, American versus American. We can't allow that to happen. So that's why I'm going to leave it all on the field the next 30 days, and why I am just so honored to be standing shoulder to shoulder with all of you to make sure that we keep faith with the sacrifices of so many who have given so much. So thank you. Thank you for having me. I will excuse myself. I have to go and head to votes now, but it's really been an honor to join you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And good luck with the rest of your career. We'll be watching you back here in Maine. And it's funny that Congressman Crow mentioned he started out enlisted, because I did as well. I spent 21 years, most of it in the Maine Army National Guard. And I started out enlisted. And if there was one officer that really embodied for me, and really for all the members of the Maine Army National Guard, I've never served with anybody that was so universally respected up and down the chain. It's going to be this guy that I introduced next. At the higher levels, he served under three Maine governors. One was a Democrat, one was an independent, and then he finished up his time as the Adjutant General under a Republican governor. And he was universally respected. Served in Vietnam and went on, transitioned from active duty to the National Guard, spent 43 years in service. And Major General Bill Libby is here tonight. And General, I got to ask, we were talking a couple days ago, and you told me you didn't even vote in the 2016 presidential election. So where do you go from not voting in the 2016 presidential election to not only voting in this one, but not being afraid to tell everybody who you're voting for? So I'll leave that lingering question out there and let you go with it how you would like, General. But thanks for being here.
Thanks, Adam. And I know Representative Crow has left us, but we've all got a private Crow story, and that's what we all share tonight. But let me answer your question. You're right. I didn't vote in 2016. Unpalatable candidates, in my opinion. I mean, never before in the history of this country had both major parties nominated somebody for the highest office in the country who had higher negative ratings than positive ratings. I mean, it's unprecedented. I didn't think either of them deserved my time and my attention. And I suspect that many people who voted for their lesser of two evils. So what's happened in the last 3.5 years, you ask? Well, let me start with, I had hope at the beginning of the Trump administration. He reached out to General Mattis as his Secretary of Defense, reached out to General Kelly as his Chief of Staff. We all know how important it is to be surrounded by good people. And I said, maybe I've misread this guy. He surrounded himself with good people. Well, I don't need to tell you how the story turned out. And it became clear in the past 3.5 years to me that the president cannot and does not operate out of any concept of what's good for the people of the United States of America. And as a result, I've decided that a change is necessary, a change in character, a change in civility, and Joe Biden represents that change for me. We face some real dangers, and I just want to talk about them briefly. Let me look at the past 3 weeks to show you how fast the news of the chaos of the Trump administration goes and how quickly we forget and what a danger that represents. 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the president perhaps not embracing an orderly transfer of power were he not elected. A week ago, we were talking about the president's tax returns. Nobody remembered the transfer of power discussion. And this week, we're talking about the debates. And let me admit to all of you on with us tonight, I tuned into the debates on Tuesday night, and I lasted 12 minutes before I was forced to turn it off. This president represents, in my opinion, a real threat to our democracy, and we need to make a change, and Joe Biden represents that change that needs to be made in November.
Thank you so much, General. I really appreciate you being here today. And one of the things that we've been dealing with as a country, not only the pandemic right now, but with climate change, with threats from overseas and internal. Part of being a military leader is dealing with everything from hurricanes and tornadoes to internal bombings and attacks. And I can't think of anybody that's really experienced that more than our next person, Brigadier General Greg Smith, served in the Army and also the National Guard for 35 years. He led the joint task forces that responded to the 2013 Boston Marathon bombings. He was involved with recovery efforts in Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Irene, as well as floods, blizzards, a tornado. He was telling me, you might want to say my career was a disaster. I thought that was a funny line when he said that. I hope I didn't steal your joke from you, General. But honestly, you led those task forces. That's serious business. That's serious work. You've been there on the front lines of some of the worst problems we've had domestically. And I wanted to ask if you could speak a little bit about your experiences with Vice President Biden, when he attended the anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombings, and your views in general on why he would better serve us.
Adam, can you hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, you faded out a little bit on me at the end. First of all, Adam, thank you for your service. You've served for many years, and I'm honored to be in your company and to be in the company of the other distinguished officers and distinguished veterans. Thank you all for what you've done for this nation. Yeah, I guess I'd like to focus on the Boston Marathon bombings, an event that I think most people have some familiarity with. But it was probably one of the last operations that I commanded in my career, and maybe some context is necessary. Marathon Monday in Boston is a holiday. It's a festival. People come from miles around to sort of celebrate the runners. It's like a rite of spring. So as usual, we mobilized 600 soldiers and airmen to line the route and conduct what we believed were static security for an event that we've attended for decades. And then at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, explosions rocked the finish line. It was like a nightmare. It was the thing that we all dread, the global war on terrorism in your backyard. And in the aftermath, there were 3 people dead, a little boy, 2 beautiful young women, and more than 200 folks maimed, wounded, injured, some in near fatal ways. What then happened is that the soldiers who were with me, the airmen who were with me, in hundreds of intelligent, courageous, uncommanded actions, saved lives, secured the area, and assisted the police in building their efforts to eventually take down the Tsarnaev brothers, which happened later on that week. During the course of all of this, as probably everybody knows who's been involved in an emergency or a disaster, or anybody who's a first responder, you don't spend a lot of time thinking about the human dimension or the emotions that occur to the people who are involved. You know that you need to tie tourniquets. You know that you've got to evacuate people. You know that you've got to secure. But you can't spend time thinking about the emotions of what's going on. Well, that changed. A year after the event, there was a semi-private gathering of first responders, doctors and nurses, military folks, law enforcement, and most importantly, survivors and family members. I knew Vice President Biden as a figure on TV, a respected person, an outstanding senator, but I didn't know much about him. But he was the speaker at this event. Walking into the event, I remember this sticks in my mind. I was coming towards the hall where this was going to be held, and there were 2 women in front of me, 2 beautiful young women. I remember one had an electric blue dress on, and the other one had this vibrant red dress. They had their arms around each other, and they were walking in sort of a strange way. As I got closer, I understood why. Because the woman in the red dress was missing one of her legs from the knee down. And the woman in the blue dress was missing a significant chunk of her ankle. They were holding on to each other so they could walk upright without stumbling. When I saw that, it made me angry that these 2 beautiful young women for the rest of their lives would have to struggle with the medical complications of their injuries caused by terrorism. Well, we entered the hall. There were speeches, there were songs, there were lots of tears. There was some laughter. And then Joe Biden got up on stage. He stood up, didn't use a microphone, didn't speak with any notes. He looked out into that group, and with tremendous empathy, tremendous respect, tremendous integrity, he touched everybody in that room. So that when he finished, when this event was over, people felt that they had been heard. More than heard, they felt that they'd been listened to, they felt that they were validated, and they felt that there was some healing that had gone on. When I got home that night, I said to my wife, "This guy's magical. I've never seen anything like it." So here's the thing. We've had a divider in chief for 3 years. He's pitted people against each other. He's summoned our worst emotions and prejudices and brought that to the surface and made us a nation where we can't communicate. The debate was a perfect example. General Libby's absolutely right. That it was just divisive, it was hateful, it was difficult to watch. We've had that for 3 years. We are no better. We are weaker as a nation. We are worse as a people. How many of us have neighbors and friends that we no longer have conversations with? It's time now for a healer in chief. That's who Joe Biden is. I think he can bring those skills, listening to people, integrity, respect, empathy, to bring our nation together and be the president for all Americans, to heal this nation, bring us forward. He talks about we're engaging in the battle for the soul of America. And so I'm happy to pitch in on that fight. Hope other people are too. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks so much, General. I really appreciate that. And having those firsthand experiences is so important. And you talk about the connection that he has with people individually, and that leads me to our next speaker who wanted to talk about this in particular. Vice Admiral Mayo, who's joining us from Harpswell. He has spent 35 years in the Navy, served in command positions, top to bottom, the director of the Navy Space Information Warfare Command and Control Directorate at the Chief of Naval Operations. He was the Naval Computer Telecommunications Master Station in Hawaii, the Commander of Naval Forces Korea, and he led the Naval Network Warfare Command to make the Navy a network-centric fighting force. And what he really wanted to talk about tonight, aside from all the things he had done, is he wanted to talk about our military families and the importance to respect the sacrifices of veterans and their families, which oftentimes are overlooked. And Admiral Mayo, I apologize if I went through your bio kind of quickly and probably misspoke on some of those commands. But I guess the thing I wanted to ask you is, could you speak to the importance of honoring veterans, military families, and why you think Joe Biden would differ significantly from our current president? You're on mute, Admiral. You got to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much. I wanted to say Congressman Crow and General Smith really spoke so well about the character deficit of our current president. And I've been observing that, as we all have, for 3+ years. And it's really disturbing. But the thing that really got me on edge and grated me was the recent reports where he spoke disparagingly of service members, distinguished service members. And to me, when that happened, he's dishonoring military families, because to me, the military is a family composed of many, many, many different military families. It's that idea of family which really got to me when the president talked ill of service members. And yeah, I was the service member. I was the one with the 35 years of service, but my family was with me every bit of the way. They moved with me every time I moved. They moved. And that's the way it is in the military. And we stayed together and supported each other. I wanted to specifically talk about two assignments that I had. One was in West Germany, just before the wall fell, and then afterwards. And then the second assignment I had that I wanted to speak about was in the Republic of South Korea. Both of those assignments at the time I served were what was called the tip of the spear. And families went, a lot of the people who went were unaccompanied, but families went for some of the higher staff because family members in those, on those assignments constituted and showed and demonstrated a commitment of our country to those alliances. And that's pretty significant because in both locations, in West Germany at the time, and then especially in the Republic of Korea, there were flare-ups, there were things that heated up, and things that really caused families to get concerned. In fact, in both places, in West Germany, when I was stationed there, and in Korea, families had evacuation plans if things really got hot. But the family stayed together. We were executing U.S. defense policy, and we were proud of it. So I wanted to really speak publicly. The fact that the president spoke ill of service members really is what got me to go public. I think that the Maine Veterans and military families effort is superb, because when I think of service members, I think of military families. I'm very proud, as my family is, of what we've done, where we've served, and very proud to have served our country. And we're very proud to have continued a tradition of service on my wife's side of the family and on my side of the family. So I think that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and their election will truly honor service members and truly represent the strongest possible support to military families going forward. I think it's imperative that that ticket get elected. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Admiral. Really appreciate that being said. I've always felt as though our families aren't getting enough respect and support from folks, and it's the people that serve that know how difficult it is on them. So we have heard so far from the Army and Navy guys, and we've yet to hear from anyone from the Air Force or Marine Corps, but this next speaker will cover both. He started out in the Marines and then transferred over to the Air Force, but through it all, he I don't know how you did this, General, but you were able to spend 27 out of 34 of your years being able to fly. My experience is a lot of times people join the military and they can only fly for a few years, and then they get promoted up higher and they end up supervising. But you must have pulled some strings, because you not only made it to Major General, but you spent 27 of those years flying an F-15 Eagle, F-18 Hornet, and probably some others. But I didn't want, as much as I'd love to talk to you about your flying experience, including the fact that you were one of the first groups up after 9/11, and you were involved in that. But one of the more interesting things that I thought that you did was when you were Deputy Director for Anti-Terrorism and Homeland Defense, you led the Joint Staff portion of planning and preparing for pandemics. And guess what? We're in the middle of a global pandemic right now. One thing that we all know about the military is the military is very good at planning. We have a plan for just about everything, and And it's interesting. I'd love to hear from you about your experiences, not only planning for a pandemic back a few years ago when you were in, but what you think of the response of our current president with respect to dealing with COVID-19 and how you think hopefully that could change with Joe Biden. So without any further ado, Major General John Tracy, thank you for being here tonight too.
Adam, thank you very much. I appreciate that very nice introduction. I was very privileged to have such a long career, and I was very fortunate to be able to spend a lot of that time in the Air National Guard, and as such, that kept me in the cockpit. But enough of that for now. I won't delay. I believe we are living the worst case scenario that we had hoped would never come to pass. And it is due to a profound lack of leadership at the highest levels of our government. So let me talk a little bit about what we learned when the H1N1 virus was emerging in the spring of 2009. We very straightforward saw it emerging because we had a good a good medical surveillance system available to us, and we had plans that were in place that gave us a good start, and we were able to move forward with military and support to civilian activities throughout the course of the pandemic, as it was, and then we're able to take a lot of the things that we learned from that experience and put them into the next series of plans and updates and those kinds of things. So let me focus on the things that we learned. One thing that we learned is absolutely necessary is that suppression is the key. When you have no vaccine for a highly contagious, virulent virus, suppression is absolutely the key. And the key to suppression is medical intelligence. If you can see it coming, you can do something about it. So in addition to that, we also, on the military side of the house, we are never given the opportunity to not show up for work. If there's a war, we're going to war, and global operations cannot halt. So it is absolutely imperative that we protect our forces from these diseases in order to be able to respond accordingly whenever and wherever it's necessary. And the fourth thing that we learned is that a global pandemic requires a global community of nations in order to respond effectively. You can't do this sort of thing piecemeal. So you talk about, I talked about suppression being the key. There are some things that we're doing right now to attempt to suppress this pandemic in personal hygiene, the sanitizing, disinfectant wipes, social distancing, all of those things very familiar. Other things that we dealt with at the Joint Staff back then that are not so familiar is the ideas of how to sequester away critical forces so that they are kept from getting the disease. And as we saw in this case, this year, the disaster with the Roosevelt, and what happens when a crew on an aircraft carrier become infected by this kind of a disease. So the third thing that we took forward as well that became very, very important to keep in mind is that when we are supporting our civilian authorities, as the pandemic is evolving, is that there are very critical decisions that have to be made when it comes to should ports of entry be closed, should social distancing be mandated, masks, other things like that. All very, very difficult decisions that have to be made. And one thing we took away from this is those decisions have to be made about a week before it is obvious to everyone else that that decision should be made. It goes all the way to the fact that there's a lot of asymptomatic transmission. very, very difficult challenge that unfortunately this go around the administration has missed. What came from all of that was the Obama-Biden administration did a couple of things that were very, very important. They put together the global health security agenda, and that took CDC assets, people, and put them in 49 nations around the globe to enhance our ability to see pandemics developing, see diseases developing before they turn into a pandemic. Gave us tremendous medical surveillance capability. In addition to that, they put together the Global Health and Biodefense Directorate as part of the National Security Council. And that was able to take the medical surveillance and turn that into medical intelligence, something we could actually act on and use. In 2016, we had it all. We had the tools, we had the plans, we had the experts in place, we had the organizations in place, and we had global leadership in our hands, prepared fully for the next pandemic. Inexplicably, the current administration dismantled all of those things that were absolutely necessary to give us half a chance. So here we are. Those decisions were made to abdicate responsibility for doing something on the federal level, doing anything effective on the federal level, making these tough decisions in a timely fashion. And so the results, unfortunately, are very predictable. And we've already seen over 200,000 fellow Americans perish because of this. Absolutely reprehensible. But there is hope. There is hope. We do have opportunities to turn this around. But like has been made, like others on the panel have mentioned before, leadership is the key to that. We need a leader who will be able to unify the country so that we work together. We need a leader who has the strength to be able to put in place the actions that come from the tough decisions. We need a leader of great character and great compassion, because this will not be easy. We need a leader who's intelligent, someone who will surround himself by experts and then listen to them and take appropriate action. We need a selfless leader, someone who will put the nation and the American people first. And Adam, I'll stop now, but I'm sure you know that leader is Vice President Biden. Thank you very much.
That was great, General. Thank you. Thank you. You didn't need to stop. You had me going. No, really, I could not agree with you more. And one of the things that you never realize when you're in the military, you kind of feel like everybody else is, because you're always around other military people and other military families. And then you get out and you really find that you're kind of unique and different. And the fact is, it's a very small proportion of our population that is served in the military, but it's amazing to me how many of us have so many other family members as sort of a part of our tradition. And we also, all of us in the military, know that we rely heavily on the Defense Department civilian folks that support us and do all sorts of work. And our next speaker, I couldn't think of anybody who could represent not only coming from a family that has lots of military members, but also being a civilian working with the DoD as well. Maureen Ramsey goes by Mo. She's a Gold Star wife, a Blue Star mom, and a decorated Army civilian. We found out when we were swapping emails that we spent a lot of the time in the same spots in Afghanistan. She was actually in Afghanistan longer than I was when I was in the Army, and she had just about every family member you can imagine that's also served. And what Mo wanted to really talk about was that the values that are instilled and how the thing that she really respects are the values that the military does such a good job of instilling in people. And really, Mo, if you could just talk with us a bit about your views on the importance of that as a leader that's leading as the commander-in-chief, and why you believe that that Joe Biden would be a better president than President Trump. So, Mo, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for inviting me. When it comes to values, okay, throughout training, whether you're enlisted, officer, civilian, no matter what branch of service you enter, one of the things that every single branch tries to inculcate into the person is the values that they're to practice. The values include loyalty, duty, respect, honesty, integrity, personal courage, selfless service. All of these are expected of the soldier, the sailor, the Marine. Excuse me, Marines, you should have been second. Airmen, Coast Guardmen, everybody tries to practice these as throughout their careers, okay? When recruiters talk to parents about prospective service members, the one thing that they all underscore as a foundation of service is trust. Trust amongst the unit, members of the unit, and their leader. If the leader professes certain values but doesn't act on them, that ends up with a unit that has been degraded. There's distrust, and there's an erosion of morale. What we end up finding here lately is a leader who doesn't practice what he professes, or even if he professes, I don't know anymore. And to me, each incident over the last several years has been a cut into the fabric of America's values. Those cuts, it's like Chinese torture, death by 1,000 cuts. They undermine our democracy and the oath that young recruit, all of us had taken back in the day, that I solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution. I believe that veterans, service members, their families deserve a commander-in-chief who practices the same values that we all practice every day. And so I turned around and I looked and I saw in Joe Biden somebody who does that. His family does that. I can recall Jill Biden and Michelle Obama going in Denver when President Obama was nominated, going down during one of the days of the convention to help military families put together care packages for their spouses or their fathers, mothers who were being deployed. That's the kind of values that we all try to practice every day. Those are American values. And it burns the heck out of me when I see the so-called leader sitting in the White House who disrespects those values. None of these people here, none of my sons who enlisted after 9/11, none of us are suckers and we're not losers. And that really bugs me, and that's that's a major reason why I'm supporting Joe Biden, and I would encourage other military families to also support him. Sorry.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you very much. You know, I think that this election, more than any other, is really, it's getting people who aren't typically involved in politics to get involved. I would say that that stands for most of the people on this call tonight. And it's getting a lot of independents, I think, involved where they typically hadn't. And my next speaker, Bob Healing, is a decorated Marine Corps combat officer. He served in Vietnam, 67 to 69, went into the private sector and spent his entire life as a registered independent. And now he's coming forward. He thinks that much more independents need to get involved and make a decision on where they're going to stand. And Bob, what's making you speak out more in frankly, very partisan election, and encourage other independents to get involved?
Thank you, Adam. I can demonstrate my independence by saying this is only the second time in my life that I have taken part in anything political. The first time I was 19 and I went out campaigning for Jack Kennedy for president. And after that, I kind of lived my independence by just voting every year, but for whichever individual I thought was most qualified. This year, there is absolutely no question for all the reasons that everyone has mentioned. The present president is wholly unqualified. He lacks, I think, as Congressman Crow pointed out, the character and integrity of a decent human being, much less the leader of the free world. So the conduct that he has shown, the disregard he has shown for simple humanity, calling dead servicemen suckers and losers, I can assure him, I lost 48 classmates in Vietnam. They were killed serving our country, and they were not suckers and losers. Those were real human beings, real men who stood up and, in this case, gave their lives for our country, much more than our current president has. So I think that I think General Libby points out that a re-election of Donald Trump to the highest office in this land would be a real threat to our democracy. And that is something that I simply cannot abide. And I'm very grateful to be a member of this august panel of so many individuals who have devoted their lives to serving our country. And I'm delighted to have this opportunity to express my very firm support for Joe Biden. He is a decent human being. He has the experience. He has the intelligence to know when to rely on others. And that is a critical requirement for someone serving in an office like President of the United States. So again, I thank everyone else on this panel for their extended service. And I know that that is a huge sacrifice to devote that much time to a military career. And I respect all of you for doing that. And I am very pleased to hear the heartfelt support that has been expressed here tonight for Joe Biden, who I think would really make a terrific president. And I will do everything I can to support him.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on and providing that. perspective. And I know that we were not thinking we had enough Marines on this call, so we're laying them on one after another right now. My next speaker, Mark Balfance, is a Marine. Well, he was a Marine. He's out now, but he served in Iraq. And Mark, one of the things you and I share is we're parents of young kids, and I cannot tell you how much it bothers me to have a president today that we're afraid to really have our kids sort of see. I was always proud, regardless of party, regardless of anything, always felt as though I wanted my kids to see a leader that they could respect. And I felt that way about every president we've had in my lifetime. But this one is entirely different. And it hits you particularly hard when you're a parent. And Mark, I just wanted you to talk a little bit, if you could, about your service and your views about the importance of having quality leadership, particularly for our kids.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think of a motto that I learned from my service in the Marine Corps: Ductus exemplo, which is Latin for lead by example. Ductus exemplo is the motto of the Marine Corps' Officer Candidate School, where the Marine Corps evaluates whether candidates have what it takes to lead Marines. Marine officers, they lead by example because someone is always watching. In particular, Marines are watching and they will model themselves after their leaders. Simple things. We know putting your hands in your pockets, to complex things, following the rules of engagement. Marines will model their actions. So one must lead by example. And leading by example is just as important to me in my life now as a civilian, especially as I raise my family here in Maine. My wife and I, we have 2 young children, and I quickly learned, like many parents do, that I have to lead by example because my children are watching and will model themselves after me. One example, I came across my son who was carrying an old computer bag, and he was filling it with a little notepad and a pen. And I asked him, what are you doing, buddy? And he responded, I'm getting ready to go to a school board meeting. He has watched me in the past get ready for school board meetings, and he was watching, and he modeled himself after me. And so I think of, Marine officer, father are 2 extremely important roles that requires that I lead by example, and the President of the United States is a role that unequivocally requires leadership by example. The president sets the example for our military as the commander in chief of our armed forces. In times of national crises, the president sets the example and establishes plans to address those problems. The president sets the example for the world. And so Donald Trump and Joe Biden are campaigning for the presidency, and everyone is watching. And I think, who do we want to serve as an example? Who do we want our children to emulate? And I think it's clear, Joe Biden. We can compare and contrast Trump and Biden in many ways, such as common decency, truthfulness, even debate style. But let's look at the people they surround themselves with. Donald Trump has a revolving door in his administration. One key person who actually joined Trump's cabinet as the Secretary of Defense was retired Marine Corps General James Mattis. And just this past summer, General Mattis wrote, Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people, does not even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us, end quote. I don't want my children modeling themselves after him, after Donald Trump. Compare that to what Joe Biden is doing. After winning a heated primary campaign for the Democratic nomination, Joe Biden welcomed his former opponents into helping shape his campaign, his policy, essentially the country. He specifically asked Senator Harris to join him as his vice president, and she did. Simply put, he brings people together. That's who I want my children to follow. Joe's leading by example. Ductus exemplo. And that's why I'm supporting Joe Biden.
Mark, that's great. Thank you very much. And that quote from Mattis, that really hit me hard too. And I've heard lots of other veterans. It was no truer statement was ever said. And General Mattis, you know, a lot of veterans, like General Libby said earlier, were thinking when Trump came in, despite the way he acted in the campaigning, that maybe there's some hope. He's bringing in some quality people, and that ended quickly. Our last speaker spent most of his time in special operations. He is a graduate of the Naval Academy, and spent most of his time as a Navy SEAL. His final assignment as a commander was as the deputy commander of Joint Special Operations Task Force in Iraq. He also served on General Dempsey's staff, chief of staff, served at really the highest levels, and then pulled the ripcord and got out after 20 years. And now he's officially a civilian. But Mike Wisecup now calls Maine his home. His family's all from Windham originally and lives out there. And he actually helped me move my house last year. We rented a U-Haul, and he was moving from Windham, and I was moving to a different house. And we spent a lot of good time talking together. And like lots of veterans, he's not overly political or doesn't like to talk politics too much. But I asked Mike to say a couple words tonight. He's been able to join us. And Mike, you can talk about what you want, obviously, but something I'd be particularly interested to hear from you as a guy that's literally been, you know, all of us have deployed. We've all, but the special operations, the Green Berets, the SEALs, Army Rangers, a lot of those guys are kind of really the first in and go through a lot of the most dangerous missions. What are your thoughts on having stability and leadership, and our current president, and why do you feel like Joe Biden would be a better president than we currently have? You're on mute, Mike. There you go.
All right, Adam. Sorry about that. Operator error. But thanks, Adam, for inviting me to this, and thanks, to all the veteran leaders that are part of this that have come out and are outspoken. I've, like many of you, I've always been a little bit reluctant to be political or be out there. Certainly, as uniformed military officers, it's not responsible for us to kind of exercise in that way. But and I normally wouldn't be involved in these kind of discussions, but what I see before us and where I see our country heading, I can't sit on the sidelines. And as my mentor, General Dempsey, in his recent book, "This is no time for spectators." This is no time for spectators, and we've got to show up and we've got to voice our opinions. And I think our opinions do count because we've all served in different ways. We've sacrificed for this country, and we have an opinion that needs to be heard. As you said, my career in special operations has taken me around the world. And I think the one common thing around my entire career has been that I've never gone anywhere or operated anywhere without allies by my side. In every case, special operations forces travel light, we're agile, we move around, and we rely extensively, not just on our own military support structure, but on our allies and our host nation support in order to be able to conduct our operations. And alliances are built fundamentally on trust and confidence that extend over decades. And sometimes in those circumstances, you might be giving more than you receive. And that's what good allies do. Because when you need your ally, they'll be there for you. And they're not a commodity that should be thought of in a transactional way. And I strongly believe that that's how President Trump views our alliances, as a commodity, as something that can be traded, something that is useful for a time and then can be discarded. And Joe Biden doesn't feel that way. And our allies know his character. They know that he is a man of his word. They know that he will be there when they need our help. And as a result, we know that they will be there when we need their help as well. We will have another national security crisis that's going to take more than just our own ability to resolve. And Joe Biden's the right man to be able to assure our alliances, to reestablish those that have been fractured over the last 4 years, and give us confidence that we are going to have teammates on our left and our right that might wear a different uniform and have a different flag on their shoulder, standing beside us to help fight, common enemies and common threats.
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate that. We're going to be wrapping this up, but before I do, I want to say quickly, I haven't sort of said why I'm supporting Joe Biden, and there are a lot of reasons. But two personal reasons. I had the opportunity to meet him twice, and both experiences they really showed me a lot about the type of leader he is, the way he connects with people. The first time I was in Bosnia, it was in December of 1997. It was my first deployment. And there was a group from DC that flew out to Tuzla Air Base. I was getting ready to go on leave, and they were just flying in. And out of a plane, none of us knew there was this VIP group coming in, but we saw Secret Service going around our base, so we knew something was up. And then they told us that there was a delegation coming. And then all of a sudden, Air Force One lands, and out comes President Clinton, Bob Dole, who he had just defeated in an election. They came out as a sign of unity, and several members of Congress and several members of the administration. And you could see them come out of the plane. Everyone was sort of wide-eyed, being in a combat zone, although Tuzla wasn't, really dangerous at the time. But out walks Senator Biden. I didn't really know who he was at the time. He was a senator, and he comes out, immediately approaches all the troops, and he asks, anybody here from Delaware? And the guy next to me raises his hand, and then Joe Biden comes up to him and he says, where are you from? And they start talking. And then he points to me because I was standing right next to him. He said, where are you from? I said, Maine. He said, close enough. Let's go get something to eat. So all three of us went and ate. And I sat with him and I had dinner, and he asked us everything. He asked us about our conditions. He asked us about the threat level. He asked us about our experiences with the culture. And then he asked us about our families and how we're doing. It was the most engaging conversation I've had with somebody that I never knew before immediately. That showed me this guy connects with our troops. I mean, he really does. And a lot of politicians that were there, you could tell they felt awkward. They felt really awkward. This guy did not. My second experience was 2 years ago when he was speaking at the graduation at Colby. And there was a small group of folks to meeting with him. And I was part of that group. And I was candidate for governor at the time. And we spent about 10 minutes, just he and I talking, which is pretty rare when you bring in the guest speaker to have some alone time with him. We talked about all sorts of things. One of the things that we talked about the most, he asked me about my deployments. I told him I'd been to Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan. And then he immediately switched to, were you married then? Do you have a family? And I said, well, my wife and I were dating when I went to Bosnia. We were married, and she was pregnant with our first child when I went to Iraq. When I got home, I had a 5-month-old daughter that I hadn't seen before. And when I went to Afghanistan, my wife and I had 5 kids, and she was home alone for a year with kids between the age of 1 and 9. So this guy, with all the people around him, takes the time. He said, I'd like to write a note to your wife. And I said, great, she would love that. And he started writing it. And then he didn't like what he wrote, so he threw that away. The guy took several minutes to write this note to my wife. And it says, Paulina, and he put in quotes, they also serve who only stand and wait. And then that ends the quote. And then he said, we owe you, we know what it's like. Our son deployed for almost 2 years to Kosovo and to Iraq. You're remarkable. Thank you for your service, Joe Biden. And he wrote it on the Colby graduation thing. And it's one of the prized possessions in our family because of the time that he took. So that showed me this guy really cares. I mean, he really, really does. Everyone wanted a piece of him, and he took the time to do that for my wife. I have huge respect for this guy. I think he'll be a great president at a time that we really need it. I'm going to wrap this up by saying, for the folks that are listening, God, go out and vote. Make sure you vote. That's the biggest take out of this, because this is all going to be wasted if you don't. You can go to voteinmaine.com to sign up or show up and vote, but make sure you do. Secondly, I'd ask that you contact other people and tell them to vote. We've got to get people to show up and vote. If you want to help in a more formal way, you can go to mydems.org, sign up on it. On Wednesdays and Thursdays in the evenings, we're going to be having veterans calling veterans throughout the state. And that's really what it's going to take. It's going to take a personal approach to get people to show up and take our country back and restore our democracy. Because those of us in the military, if we learned anything, traveling around the world, democracies are very fragile things. They really rely on a faith in government, and they really rely on people exercising their right to vote and electing good people with some integrity. So I'm supporting Joe Biden. I would encourage you to do the same. I want to thank you all for joining. I'm sorry we ran about 10 minutes late, but I hope you enjoyed it and have a nice night. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.